Oh, check your text message. Let them know what you're going to be bringing, how many people you're going to be bringing. It's open to family and friends. We want to make sure that there's enough for everybody to get at least two plates. You know, you can't do a cookout and just have one plate. It's a two-plate minimum. All right. So good morning. Today I want to kind of continue in the same vein that we've been talking about from last week. Last week we talked about circumcision of the heart. This week I want to continue with an emphasis and a focus on the heart. So, Book of Proverbs, I love the Book of Proverbs, and I know you probably thinking, Pastor Dave, you say you love every book, every verse. But the book of Proverbs, I was introduced to the book of Proverbs when I was a young Christian, introduced to it from this sense. James, Marvin, you guys all got exposed to the Institute and Basic Life Principles, and one of the things that they emphasized that I really took to heart as a young Christian was the reading of the Proverbs every day. So there's 31 Proverbs, and there's generally 30, 31 days in a month. So every day you read a proverb and you meditate on that proverb and you try to memorize as much of that proverb. You do that every day, every month, you kind of cycle through it. And the beauty in the book of Proverbs is Proverbs teaches us, it instructs us. It's a book of wisdom. Most ancient religions, most ancient faiths have some type of book of wisdom. Proverbs is the book of wisdom, and the benefit that it provides us is it teaches us how to walk with man and ourselves. Yes, it is centered around the relationship with God and what we do and how we approach and how we respond to God. But its instructions provide us a roadmap on how to evaluate our own lives and how to walk with others. And then you take the book of Psalms, and Psalms is a book that teaches us and primarily focuses on walking with God. So Proverbs is a book of wisdom, and I wanted to take a look at Proverbs to get an understanding of this phrase that's in the book of Proverbs that's called the wise heart. So let's jump right in here. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 8. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 8 is our opening text. It says, the wise in heart will receive commands, but a prodding fool will fall. The wise in heart will receive commands. Some of your translations might say instruction, right? Admonition. The wise in heart is open to receiving instruction, receiving commands, and those commands are related to the principles and precepts of God. But then it counterbalances that wise person with the unwise person or a fool. And that's one thing that you'll see repeatedly through the book of Proverbs, this comparison between the wise person and the fool person, the fool. I want us to focus today on this whole issue of the wise in heart. If you remember last week when we were discussing circumcision of the heart, we looked at a couple of verses that helped us to understand why God why was it important from God's perspective to be able to do this work on our hearts. And we looked at a couple of verses, and here's the culminating verse in terms of what it is God wants from us. What does God require from us, right? To walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. So here God is saying that relationship and walking with him is really an output of what's in our heart, not just what we mechanically or physically do. It's really the attitude of our heart. He emphasizes all our heart, not part of our heart, not some of our heart, but with all of our heart. And then in Deuteronomy 30, we learned last week that the reason why God said that he wanted to circumcise our heart, and who remembers what we said last week when we talked about what it meant for our heart to be circumcised?
So that we could be obedient and to do God's will, because without the heart being circumcised, we won't have that, because it's too hardened to allow anything to get in. So that our heart can be changed.
No,
Something to that effect.
no, that's it. That's it. And that perfectly said. And what is it that when it's circumcised, what is it that is cut off from us that allows us to be obedient?
Is it the cutting back of our flesh?
Our flesh, our old,
That's what I was,
yeah, our old nature, what we got from our daddy Adam. That part of you that makes you want to do the stuff that you say, why am I doing this? When you in the middle of telling everybody off, cussing everybody out, and there's a part of yourself, why am I doing this? Can't you stop? Man, you acting a daggone fool. That part that just persists in what you know you shouldn't be doing, that's that old nature. That's what we get from our daddy Adam. That stuff is cut off from us, and cut off in the sense that it no longer has the ability to dictate and control to us unless we choose to surrender to it. And God is saying that part has to be cut away from us so that we can love him and we can serve him. And again, he says, I'm circumcising your heart and the heart of your descendants. Why? So that you can love the Lord your God with all your heart. In other words, our relationship with God is centered around our hearts. God says that, listen, if your heart's not right, your relationship with me can't be right. So back to our whole idea of the wise in heart will receive commands. The wise in heart will receive commands. The heart is pictured all throughout scripture. So what is the heart? And some of this I want to move quickly, because you know me, I feel the necessity to lay a good foundation, right? So when we think about, well, what is the heart? What is the heart? So from a biblical model, from a biblical ideal and concept, the heart is really the center of the human spirit. It's our emotions, our thoughts, our motivations, our actions, right? Think about the phraseology we use, even if a person isn't biblically centered or biblically oriented. Think about the phraseology we use just naturally. Man, that stuff hurt me to my heart. Man, I mean that with all my heart. There's this sense, right? There's just intuitive sense that the center of who and what we are is built around the heart. It's the wellspring of life. All things spring from our heart. Everything springs from our heart. But here's the challenge. When we think about wisdom, we think about loving God, we think about serving God. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Now, when we think about wisdom, we don't always necessarily think about wisdom from the standpoint of the heart. When we think about the wisdom, what do we generally think of when we think about wisdom?
Your brain.
The brain.
mind. Yeah.
The head, right? What we're going to see from Proverbs is God's perspective about wisdom is that it really doesn't have much to do with intellect. as much as it has to do with the condition of one's heart. So let's examine very, very quickly. These are verses that we've all heard, that we've all known, but we want to provide a framework, right? Let's examine what the problem is. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Jeremiah 17:19. I want someone to quickly read some of these verses as they pop up, please. Jeremiah 17:9. Someone read that for us, please.
The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?
Luke 6:4-5.
Can we keep on?
Yep.
Go ahead, Brenda.
The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil.
What we produce comes out of where?
The heart.
Our heart. Matthew 7:21-23.
For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, covenant, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within.
Man, that's a whole lot, right? That's a whole mouthful.
That's a whole lot.
That's a whole lot. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. The heart, unaffected, unchanged, unsurrendered to God, this is what its issue is. All of this stuff comes out of our heart. It's deceitful. I can't know it. My heart will lie to me. My heart will deceive me. My heart will trick me up. It's wicked. And God says, desperately wicked. The only one that can know it is him. We don't know the truth of our own heart apart from God. The heart is what dictates and determines what comes out of our life, right? The treasures, good comes out of the treasure of the heart, evil comes out of the treasure of the heart. Jesus said, from within, all this stuff comes from the heart. That's why it doesn't make sense to try to legislate morality, because this stuff isn't external. You can't legislate the heart. That stuff is there. Now, here's insight that Proverbs provides to us, because the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Left unaffected, unchanged, unsurrendered to God. Someone read this for us, please.
The one who
The one
trusts.
who trusts,
Go ahead, Crystal.
the one who trusts in his own heart is a fool, but the one who walks in wisdom will escape. Proverbs 28:26.
That's that Crystal just gave us that old school. That's that old school church training. She read it and gave you the verse just in case you were asleep. Go ahead, girl. Now check this out. Check this out. Why is the person who trusts their own heart, why are they a fool? In light of some of the things that we just read, why would the person who trusts their own heart be considered a fool?
Because the heart is deceitful and your heart can fool you. So if you're going by what your heart tells you, it's foolishness.
Yeah. Ever trust your heart and found yourself in a situation like, man, Lord.
Hex, yeah.
Man, I knew it. And then here's what we say. Something told me not to, right? Yeah, when we trust our own heart, this thing that is deceitful, this thing that is broken, this thing that is full of all kinds of wickedness, we're really not wise to trust our own heart. But then look at the back end of this verse. Crystal, read the back end of the verse. And then
But the
go ahead.
but the one who walks in wisdom will escape.
So Proverbs is telling me the way, what is the way that I'm able to find escape from my own wicked, foolish heart?
You got to walk in wisdom.
Wisdom is a route of escape. If I don't pursue, and this is this is why so much of biblical precept and principle is difficult for many to accept and embrace, is because often God lays out to us binary choices, this or that. There's not a lot of middle ground, not a lot of middle ground at all. And what this verse implies is either I'm going to be walking in wisdom, or I'm going to be trusting the foolishness of my own heart. It's kind of like no middle ground. And that's difficult for us coming out of the way our culture and society has shaped us to think. We always look for the middle ground, right? When we look at our political construct in society, it's binary, and then there's are those who like to try to find this middle ground, this center. But with God, there is no center. It's one side or the other in terms of truth and a lie, life and death, foolishness and wisdom. So God tells us that the way that we can escape the problem of our heart is to walk in wisdom. See, the reality is you and I, we are what our heart is. Can't outlive, can't outrun, can't outtalk your heart. There's a couple of verses just to kind of get a biblical perspective on some of this. Proverbs 27:19, as in water, face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man. As in water, face reflects a face, so a man's heart reveals the man. What is this verse saying to us?
It talks about the reflection of self, but then it talks about the reflection of a man's heart.
Yeah, our heart reveals who we are. Our heart is, it's more than a reflection of what we are. It is what we are. It is the essence of the person. It's the seat. Remember, we talked about it's the seat of our will and our emotions. It's the motivation of our intellect. It's what drives the direction of our actions. It's our nature. Your heart reveals the reality of who you are. Proverbs 23:7 says, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. As he thinks in his heart, so is he. Our heart is who we are. What is one of the ways that we can get an indication about what is in a person's heart? Any verse or any scripture, any instruction, guideline God's provided us that you can think of that he tells us how we can understand or know what's in a person's heart?
By what a man says, because it flows from
Yeah, speech. Yeah, speech is number one.
But what a man, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What we say reveals what's in our heart. I can't outrun my heart. I can't outlive my heart. I can't outspeak my heart. What I say is the actual truth of what's in my heart. Not just the one, and it's not just the one statement, it's the consistency, it's the totality of your speech and your words. Our heart tells us who we are. It's messed up. The heart of the problem is the heart. The only way we can escape it is to find wisdom. And the reality of who and what we are is seen by our heart. That's the truth of who and what we are. So the scripture tells us, now we understand Proverbs 4:23 and why it tells us. Some of your translation says guard, right? This is the more modern translations. It says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So what I do with my heart, how I learn to guard my heart. I was looking at another translation that said steward your heart. I said, oh man, I love that. Steward your heart. That implies a steward is one that cares for something that belongs to someone else. My heart, as a confessed believer, belongs to who?
Christ.
God.
Yep. So the ideal of stewarding, taking care of something that belongs to someone else. I had never seen that translation before. I've seen guard, I've seen keep, but I like steward. Steward your heart with all diligence. Why? Because it's what you are. It's what you say. It's what you do. It's the center of who you are. You can't outlive it. You can't outstrip it. Eventually, your words will reveal what's in it. So how does all of this connect with this ideal of wisdom? Wisdom has three basic components. As been said earlier, we generally think of wisdom as a function of the intellect, right? Here on the screen, if you've got your screen, I encourage you to take a look at it. If you don't have your screen up, I encourage you to pop it up and take a look here. But wisdom is made up of knowledge, understanding, and application. Knowledge, understanding, and application. Where do you think most people generally put the emphasis on in thinking about wisdom?
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowledge is the accumulation of information or facts about a certain thing, right? It's accumulation of facts, information about a certain thing. Our culture, our society is driven by knowledge, the accumulation of facts. Now listen, I take my car in to get service. I want somebody to have some knowledge. I go to the doctor. I want somebody to have knowledge. I bring a contractor into my house. I want somebody to have knowledge. I turn my little meagerly investment portfolio over to somebody. I want them to have knowledge. Don't get me wrong. Knowledge is important, right? But that's not the center to this ideal of biblical wisdom. I just thought I should have put biblical wisdom in the circle instead of just wisdom. Knowledge is accumulation of information or facts about a certain thing. Watch this. While understanding is good judgment or the skill to govern your life in a successful manner. Understanding, it's judgment, it's discernment, it's the ability to take knowledge, to govern my life in a successful manner. The practical application of knowledge and understanding is what we call wisdom. Application is the skill to take my knowledge and my understanding and actually apply it. Of these three, what do you think is, what would you say is the most important?
Understanding.
I got one for understanding. Anyone else? Most
Application.
application.
I say application.
Application. Okay. Anybody else?
Pastor, I'm at the beach. Can you repeat the question?
Of the three elements of biblical wisdom, and they're all necessary, which of the three would you say is the most important?
I think understanding.
Understanding. Is there any biblical insight or instruction we have that could help us to inform how we look at the basic elements of biblical wisdom?
And all you're getting,
Doers.
So I heard be doers of the word. I
and
heard
all you're getting, get understanding.
all that get understanding. Yeah, because this is what I think. Absolutely, we're to be doers of the word. Absolutely. That absolutely. But here's what I think gets missed a lot of times in the way that the church today, and I don't want to sound like the church police. What gets missed often in teaching the word today is understanding. We take facts of the Bible and then we say do step A, step B, step C. And we've kind of reduced biblical teaching to just do step A, step B, step C. Here's 7 principles, here's 6 steps, here's 3 things. But we don't spend time investing in the understanding. See, the understanding is where the discernment really comes from. The understanding is where the wisdom really comes from. That's why the scripture says, in all of your getting, get understanding. Marv, Al, Mike, were you in the military?
Yeah, he was in the Army.
Yeah. So remember our military training? Before they sent you to the range to fire your weapon, you had to understand. You had to break it down, put it back together again, break it down, put it back together again, know all the pieces, all the parts, right? I was a tanker before I got in a tank, drove a tank, loaded a tank, fired a tank. I spent weeks in school studying about the tank, its parts, its pieces, its components, how it works, how it operates. Before you got to application, the emphasis was on understanding, so that you knew why you were doing what you were doing. It's not just enough to do, it's understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I may be doing it this specific way versus that way. That's wisdom. So wisdom, biblical wisdom is this combination of biblical information, precepts, principles, it's discernment, judgment, the understanding of the why of those things. And then it's the application. Because without the application, listen, I'm not saying application isn't valuable, because without the application, you got nothing. Now, so understanding these dynamics and principles, what ultimately is a wise heart? What ultimately is a wise heart? Here's kind of like a working kind of definition I tried to come up with. this ideal that wisdom is the joining of your heart in unity with God to discern his way, to discern his will. Wisdom is the joining, a wise heart is the joining of your heart in unity with God to discern his will and his way. I didn't put it up here because I didn't want to copy and paste all of those verses. But does anyone remember when God gave instruction to Moses to build the tabernacle? I should have put it up there, at least one of the verses. When God gave instruction to Moses to build the tabernacle, God put a criteria on who was to be involved in the process of building the tabernacle. And that criteria, time and time again, God used this phrase, all those who were wise in heart. All those who were wise in heart. All of those whose heart was joined to God's will to build it according to the pattern. That is what a wise heart is. It's a heart that's joined together with God to be able to discern God's will and God's way. This whole ideal of a wise heart, it's a Hebrew phrase, it's an idiom, or it's a phrase, and it really has to do with knowing God's heart. That a wise heart is a heart that knows God's heart. A wise heart is a heart that knows God's heart. Bring it back to our opening positioning text. The wise in heart will receive commands, but a prodding fool will fall. Why will a wise heart receive commands? The commands are God's commands. The commands are God's instructions. A wise heart is one that's in harmony with the commands, the instructions, the precepts, the principles of God's heart. The one that resists, that rejects, is characterized as a prodding fool who will ultimately fall or fail. Proverbs 16:21. Understanding, again, what does it mean to have a wise heart? What does it mean to have a wise heart? Because wisdom is the way that I escape my own deceitful, dysfunctional heart. Proverbs 16:21, the wise are known for what?
Their understanding.
Their understanding. Not just facts, because there's a lot of people that have Bible facts. I've run into homeless people who had a lot of Bible facts, right? Who knew a lot of Bible. The wise are known not for their facts, not for their information, but they're known for their understanding. And notice how their understanding is evaluated. Somebody read that whole verse again, and then read, you know me, read it slow.
The wise are known for their understanding. Their pleasant words make them better teachers.
So what's the connection here? There's two things that are connected here in this verse that relates to wisdom and the components and elements of wisdom.
Known for their understanding that will help them to make them better teachers.
Yeah, see, when we're really wise, when we really are wise of heart, when we really have our hearts joined with the heart of God to know his way, to know his will, we are able to teach that, to instruct that. We generally tend to think of teaching from the sense of, well, I'm not gifted to teach. This is not what that's talking about. It's the ability to convey understanding to others. It's the ability to convey understanding to others. Well, why do well y'all Christians and why do y'all do what you do the way you do it? See, the person who has understanding can convey that to others. They may not receive it because they don't have the Spirit of God, but he can convey it to them. Kind of like what we heard Ray doing after the worship, right? What you heard was an understanding of the whole parable that Jesus gave about what you build your house on. What is the essence, the understanding of that? When you have understanding, you can be a better teacher. And for years in the body, we don't really focus on understanding. We just focus on here's some information and then here's what you do. And so being able to provide teaching and instruction and wisdom, because wisdom is information, it's knowledge, it's understanding and application. You take any element out, it's not wisdom. Let me stop right there for a moment because I'm going to give you 6 practical steps now. We've laid a framework. We've gotten some understanding. Are there any thoughts, questions, points of clarity, input? The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. And why is the heart the problem?
Because it's deceitful.
Because
There's no exact measurements, and there's no 1 to 1 or 2 to 1.
what's the relationship between my identity and my heart?
Your heart is where your life comes from and identifies who you are.
Yep. And what is it that gives indication to people and even to myself if I'm listening about what the condition of my heart is?
The words that come out your mouth.
The words that come out of your mouth. And what is the thing that God tells us is the way that we can escape our own hearts?
By being wise and taking instruction.
By being wise and taking instruction. Yes. Yep. The one who trusts in his own heart is a fool, but the one who walks in wisdom will escape. What does he escape? He escapes his own heart. Boy, you guys are good. So I want to talk about developing a wise heart. How do we develop a wise heart? Okay, Pastor Dave, you told me what a wise heart is. You gave me some knowledge and some information. You gave me some understanding about the necessity of a wise heart, that a wise heart is ultimately a heart that is joined with God, that understands and knows and discerns God's will and God's way. How do I get there? First thing we got to do, and these aren't necessarily in order, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some basic fundamental principles. You can probably have 20 on this list, but for the sake of time, we didn't get all 20. First thing we have to do if we're going to develop a wise heart is we have to prioritize it. We have to prioritize developing a wise heart. And I'm going to bring these up and I'm going to ask you guys to read. And if there's some of you on, you haven't read or generally don't read, I want to encourage you to just kind of jump in and engage. Proverbs 4:8. Someone read that for us, please.
Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her.
Yeah, in Proverbs, thank you, Nancy. In Proverbs, wisdom is often spoken of as a woman. And it's saying, if you prize wisdom highly, what do you think that means, to prize it highly? It doesn't say just prize it, because there's a lot of things you and I prize or value, but it says to value it highly. What do you think that implies, to value it highly?
I forgot my thought. It was there, but I lost it.
Put nothing above it. The highest rank.
That's very good, Shayla. Very
Thank
good.
you, Shayla.
To put nothing.
Sorry, Brenda, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just
No,
wanted to throw it out there.
Girl, that's what I was going to say, but I lost the thought.
Yeah. So, dang, Brenda, you just made me lose my thought. So when you prize something highly, the ideal is that you prioritize it above everything else. That's where it begins. Do you value wisdom? Do we value having a heart that is informed by knowledge and understanding and the discipline of application, that's informed by understanding the will of God and the way of God? Is that important to me? And not only is it important, but is it important above everything else? And the best picture I could give for this, I wanted us to see it in scripture rather than just say the story, because I believe that there's the entrance of thy word bringeth light, man. So we all know the story of Samuel. And so David's dead, Samuel's now made king, and he's made ruler of all these people. And now what does this young dude, what's he gonna do? And God approaches him and says, listen, in 1 Kings 3:5, says that Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night. I'm sorry, not Samuel, I said Samuel, I meant Solomon. I'm trying to rush because I'm looking at the time. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And God said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. So Solomon's king over Israel now. God comes to him and says, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Now, let me just pause for a moment. And don't be so super spiritual. Don't be so super sanctimonious. If God showed up to you in the middle of the night and said, hey, Mike, ask for whatever you want and I'll give it to you, what would you ask for? More rhetorical, right?
That's a really good question.
Right?
Yeah.
But watch this. Watch Samuel. Skip down a couple of verses. So Solomon, I keep saying Samuel. Solomon basically said, man, listen, this is a big job, man. I can't handle this. So this is what he asked for. Someone read verse 8.
So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?
He's asking, right? And if you look at what he's asking for
to govern your people and to distinguish between right.
Yeah. He's asking for all the elements of wisdom. He's asking for understanding. He's asking for knowledge so that he can apply all of that stuff in a way where he can effectively govern God's people. And notice God's response to him. Someone other than Brenda, someone read, because I want to get everybody involved here. So someone read God's response to Solomon's request?
The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth or for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice,
Give you the next verse. Boom.
I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be.
Now think about this, because we're just starting out to understand, how do I develop a wise heart? We said you have to prioritize.
Can we read that again, please? I'm sorry, I'm at work and I don't have my Bible. Can we read that again, please? A little slower, please. Thank you. I want to see it. Thank you.
The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, since you have asked for this and not for long life or for wealth or for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be.
Yeah. So we're trying to understand, how do I develop this thing? I hear you, Dave. Okay, now what do I do, man? How do I get there? Okay, I'm not there yet. What do I need to do? The first is I gotta prize it. I gotta esteem it highly. I gotta elevate its value over all the other things. This verse gives us a living example of what that looks like. God said, Solomon, ask for whatever you want. And Solomon valued a discerning heart or a wise heart over he didn't ask for riches, wealth. He didn't ask for power. He said, God, I want a heart that's in alignment with your heart and your will, to understand your way, so that I can apply my leadership, my governance in a proper way. So the first thing for you and I, if we are going to develop a wise heart, is I have to prioritize it. I have to prioritize. I have to see it as being more valuable than anything else. Second thing that I need to do is I have to ask for it. That's what we saw with Solomon. I have to ask for it. What does that look like? Proverbs 2:3. Someone read Proverbs 2:3 for us, please.
Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding.
If you cry out for discernment, lift up your voice for understanding. What does that give the imagery of?
Prayer, just talking to God.
Prayer, talking to God. Prayer and talking to God. Is there do you get the sense that there's a level of urgency, or is it passive? Is it just cried out like, hey, I'm in a crowd, I see my boy over there, yo man, yo, what's up? Or is there something elevated about this?
It's elevated. It's a priority.
Yeah, it's that word in the Hebrew, cry out and lift up. Both of those words denote like somebody drowning in an ocean and they're crying to be rescued. They're crying to be saved. It's a cry of desperate need. It's not passive. Not kind of like, well, I'll take it if you give it to me. Well, I'll go after it if it's easy to get, but I ain't gonna put no effort to it. I ain't gonna rearrange my schedule to try to get it. If it comes, hey, I'll take it, but I ain't, no, you got to ask for it. And I could have said it better than ask for it. You have to be desperate for it. You have to cry out, lift up your voice. That's crying out to God for knowledge and understanding and application. That's not passive. That's a cry of the heart, of need and desperation. Because God, if I don't get discernment, God, if I don't get understanding, God, I am stuck with the folly and the foolishness of my own heart. I'm stuck with what you told me is wicked. I'm stuck with what you told me is the source of all kinds of evil and destruction. Third thing, if we're going to develop a wise heart, is to realize the shortness of life. So I got to prize it above everything else. I got to ask for it. And really, I should have changed that from ask for it is, man, I got to be desperate for it. I got to be desperate for it. Because there's a lot of things that we may prioritize, but we're not going to be disciplined or committed enough to actually do what it takes. So it's more than just asking for it. It's being desperate for it. Third thing is I have to realize the shortness of life. Psalm 90, verse 12, all of us know this verse. Lord, teach us to number our days. Why? Lord, why do I need to number? And it's not so much as just about counting, but it really has to do about valuing and recognizing life's short, man. Whatever the number is, it's a number. It's limited. On this side of eternity, in this thing called life, in which we are laying up the foundation for how we will spend eternity, this side of eternity is short. We live in bodies that are not, they were designed to live forever, but sin corrupted them and now we die. There's sickness, there's disease, there's calamities. The psalmist says, teach me to number our days, that I might gain a heart of wisdom. Some translation says that I might apply my heart to wisdom. Some say that I might gain a wise heart. Teach me to number my days. I only got but so much time here. I want to know your will. I want to be in alignment with your will. I don't want to waste time. I'm going to be just saying, like, it's sobering. I'll be 58 next month. 58. And on the one hand, I'm like, God, I made it. I can't believe I made it, because I should have never made it past 26. And on the other hand, it's like, man, time goes so fast, don't it? Those of us who are a little older, don't it go fast? Faster than what we thought, right? Last night, hanging, thinking about the old 8th Street Club days, stuff we used to do back in the day. It's like, man, that seemed like yesterday and blinked. Now we're old. And how many of us who are older would wish we could go back and apply biblical wisdom into our lives?
Yes.
And for those of you who are younger, the admonition here is every day is important. Life goes fast. Life is short. Trust me, it goes fast. Make the most of every day by purposing to apply biblical wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and application into every day of your life. Don't just prioritize it. Don't just ask for it. Purpose to prioritize its implementation every day, because life is short. You may not get tomorrow to make up for the mistakes caused by the lack of wisdom today. And that's a whole sermon in and of itself. Fourth thing that we have to do to develop a wise heart. This is simple. I had to walk with the wise. Proverbs 13:20. Someone read that. This is probably the simplest instruction there is.
Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise.
There's an old adage that says, show me your friends, I'll show you your destiny. Who you walking with? And remember, wisdom, biblical wisdom, not that colloquial wisdom, not that horse sense wisdom. And there's value to that. Please don't misunderstand me. There's value to that comes out of years of experience and passed down from generation to generation, understanding about the practical elements of life. There's value in that, but I'm talking about biblical wisdom. I'm talking about the wisdom that is informed by biblical knowledge, biblical understanding for the purposes of biblical application. I'm talking about the wisdom that is designed to unite and join a person's heart to the heart of God, to know and understand God's will and God's way. Who you walking with? Who you walking with? The folks you walk with, what they talking about. Because what they talking about reveals their heart. We develop a wise heart by finding other people whose hearts are joined with God's heart to understand his will and his way, who have received from the instruction of Scripture knowledge and understanding for the purpose of application. Are we walking with people who are good at talking about the word, but when you look at their life, there's no application? That's not a wise person. That's an informed person, not a wise person. Whoever walks with the wise, you become wise. Fifth thing for developing a wise heart, I have to pursue it. I have to pursue it. Someone read this for us, please. Proverbs 2, verse 4 through 6.
Says, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding.
Man. I have to pursue it. This verse gives the pursuit of wisdom, the pursuit of having a wise heart, in the image and picture of pursuing or looking for or seeking for silver. If you seek it like silver, something precious, something valuable, man, you're gonna hunt that thing down. You're gonna pursue it. You're gonna chase it down. And when you get it, look what it says. When you get that thing that you're pursuing, wisdom characterized as silver, characterized as hidden treasure, because it's not just out there. That's why you got to pursue it, because it's not just out there. It's not just laying on the ground for everybody. Everybody ain't gonna have this wisdom. Everybody can have biblical information, biblical knowledge, but not wisdom. Oh no. But when I pursue it, look at the text. Man, that's rich. I just saw, man, that is so rich. what happens when I pursue having a wise heart by pursuing and seeking wisdom like it's silver and hidden treasure? What happens?
It says that you will then understand the fear of the Lord, and then you will find the knowledge of God.
Now watch this. Look how what we've been teaching. Look how all this stuff is the construction of it. So then I get understanding.
Yeah.
I get understanding about what does it really mean to have reverence, respect, all for God, and I get knowledge.
Knowledge, the two. Yeah.
And look how it culminates that understanding and knowledge. What's that last verse?
The last one in the end, that the knowledge and wisdom and understanding comes from the Lord.
Yeah. Then the Lord gives wisdom.
Yeah.
From his mouth, right? From his mouth. What from his mouth? What do you and I have in possession that comes from God's mouth?
The word.
Word.
Hey.
Come on now.
From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. From the word. That's a whole thing that is just exploding in my spirit right now. Man. So I have to pursue it. Because if I pursue it, there's some stuff that God kicks in. When I pursue it and take hold of it, I get understanding, I get knowledge, and then God gives wisdom. And remember, wisdom is knowledge, understanding with application. So God gives me the knowledge, he gives me the understanding, and then he gives me wisdom. In other words, he gives me ability to apply what I've heard. My goodness. I'll be studying that for myself tonight. So developing a heart, a wise heart, I got to prioritize it. I got to elevate it above everything else. Solomon could have chosen wealth and strength and the defeat of his enemies, but he said, God, I want a wise heart. And God said, I'm gonna give you that and everything else. You got to ask for it. You got to cry out for it. You got to cry out for understanding, cry out for knowledge. You got to realize, man, life is short. I can't be wasting days in foolishness. I need to understand God's heart and God's will today. I need knowledge and understanding to apply God's will and God's way into the context and circumstances of my life today. God, I need you to help me to raise these kids today. God, I need you to help me to figure out how to navigate the workplace today because they losing their mind. God, I need you to help me to know how to deal with my spouse today. Because life is short. I got to walk with wise people. I got to evaluate my friends. I got to evaluate, are they wise? Do they have knowledge, understanding, and application? Or do they just have knowledge, but no application? I got to find wise people to walk with. I got to pursue it. I got to pursue it like I would be hunting down a hidden treasure or something valuable. Because if I pursue it with that mindset, I'll find it and God will kick in knowledge and understanding and he'll transform that knowledge and understanding. The Lord gives wisdom. He'll give me the capacity to apply that knowledge and understanding in my life. And then lastly, I have to be willing to become a fool in man's eyes. I have to be willing to become a fool in man's eyes.
Amen.
First Corinthians 3:18 says this: let no one deceive himself. I love, man, let no one deceive himself. Remember, we read earlier, the one who listens to his own heart is a fool because his heart is deceitful. Let no one deceive himself. So the deception of self has to do with our heart. Don't fall for the okey-doke of your heart. If anyone amongst you thinks that he is wise in this age. So in other words, you think that you got all of, notice, in this age. In other words, age means dispensation, worldly wisdom, worldly intellect, worldly reason. Remember, I always say this. In this world, you don't need God to quote unquote prosper. There are many people who understand the rudiments and principles of economics that govern this system, ordered by the principalities and powers, who are able to be successful and reap reward out of this system without God. Some of the richest men in the world don't even believe in God. So you can be wise in this age and not have a clue about God. If anyone amongst you thinks he is wise in this age. So I take the principles and precepts of this world, and I got all of my stuff together according to what the world says. You ought to have all your stuff together. I got my retirement. I got this. I got that. I got, you know, according to the world, I'm wise. I'm smart. I got my stuff according to the world. Notice. Let him become a fool that he may become wise. Let him become a fool that he may become wise. In other words, give up that, maybe give up's the wrong word, but recognizing that there's a wisdom that the world doesn't have. And we just spent the last hour discussing what that is. And being willing to be viewed as being foolish by the world standard in order to embrace God's standard of biblical wisdom, not being afraid to be viewed as being a fool. When I left that global director's position I had, everybody thought I was crazy. Who would leave a position like that to go and pastor in a church? What is wrong with you? You don't lost your mind. Think about some of the choices and decisions you've made. Why are you staying with him? Why are you staying with her? I would have been gone. Why are you doing that? Why do you put up with that? Why do you do this? The world's wisdom says respond this way. The world wisdom says respond that way. Why are you doing that? Girl, you foolish. Man, you foolish. Why are you giving your money to that church? You foolish. If we are to have a wise heart, which is a heart that is shaped by biblical wisdom, which is a heart which is informed with the knowledge of God, the understanding of God, the application of God, a heart that is joined and united with God's heart to understand God's will and God's way, we have to be willing to be viewed by the world as a fool, because God's wisdom is backwards compared to the wisdom of the world. I end with this. Why is all this so necessary? Why is all this so important? Again, the one who trusts in his own heart is a fool. But the one who walks in wisdom will escape. How do we escape? Our own hearts, our own naturally inclined hearts that are deceitful, that are full of all kinds of mess, that really don't want to do the will of God, untouched, uninformed, unchanged by God. wisdom is the way that you and I can escape. Here's a verse we all know. Trust in the Lord. Watch this. Trust in the Lord. How?
All your heart.
With all my heart. The heart is the center. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. I can't trust in the Lord with all my heart unless I have a wise heart. My natural heart, my heart left to its own devices, my heart that is uncircumcised, because remember last week we talked about circumcision is twofold. There's a circumcision that we receive when we get born again. Just like Israel came out of Egypt, there was a circumcision, but then on the journey, their hearts became hardened again, and they needed to be circumcised a second time. We receive the circumcision of Christ, but then as we walk out our faith, sometimes there's areas of our heart that get hardened. There's areas in our heart where we don't want it to align to the will and the way of God. There's areas in our heart, maybe we don't have the understanding to be able to know how to apply the knowledge. The multitude of reasons. But if my heart isn't positioned in wisdom, I'll never be able to trust him. It's not half-hearted trust. It's a trust with all my heart. And when I trust God with all my heart, watch the connection to what we're talking about with wisdom. When I trust God with all my heart, what will I not do? I won't lean on my own understanding. When it talks about your own understanding, that's that worldly knowledge. That's my reason. That's my intellect. Dorothy, I always remember something that Pastor Bernard used to always say, and it's one of the things for my 5 years at Impact that stick with me. And it don't make sense. It makes faith.
Amen.
There's a lot of stuff that don't make sense, don't line up with your own understanding, but it makes faith. Watch this. And in all your ways, acknowledge him. I think that's talking about application. How do I acknowledge God in all my way? By applying his knowledge, his understanding, his application into the circumstances of my life. That's how I acknowledge him. And as a result, he directs my path. Why? Because I'm applying his will. My heart is aligned with his heart, his will, and his way. And then look at the admonition at the end. And be not wise, again, in your own eyes. Back to wisdom again. Trusting God with all of our heart is a thing about wisdom. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. Be not wise in your own eyes. Don't have your own version of knowledge, your own version of understanding, your own version of application. Don't have your understanding, knowledge, and application tied around your will, but have your knowledge, understanding, and application tied around God's will. That is what it means to have a wise heart. So, thoughts, comments,